My family, we were vacationing up at Olympic National Park. My son and I were having fun in the mountains, and we got off trail at some point. We decided that because we were going to be late, instead of going back where we came, we were just going to take a shortcut around the mountain, and that proved to be not a very wise decision. So we started going down this ridge, and it ended up being a whole lot more difficult than what we expected. And there were several places on the ridge that we came to a dead end. We got stuck, and the crux of the day was my son was up above, and we were on some loose rock and on a pretty steep slope, and he'd kicked off a basketball-sized rock, and it came down at me, and I had to jump to avoid it, and I started going down the mountain. Luckily, I came to a stop pretty quickly, but I was pretty beat up, and my son, I was out of sight at that point, so he didn't see me. I quickly got up and I ran back up to him to make sure that he was okay. And we ran out of water at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so we drank out of a stream, and finally we got down to a lower point. We had to bushwhack through the densest vegetation that I've ever hiked through. And at 6:30 we eventually came to a rock, and we'd been hiking for over 12 hours. And Joshua was done, and so we found this rock that was 10 feet off the ground, and it was a good place to stay for the night. So it did get to like 50 degrees, low 50s that night, so we were both shaking all night because we were in shorts. And but that night my son and I got to talk like we'd never talked before, and he shared some things with me that were weighing on him, and we got to have an experience and bond that I'll never forget, and I know that he'll never forget as well, and we'll always have that special time together. The next day we ended up hiking down, and we eventually found a dry riverbed that turned into a river. We eventually came to a big metal culvert, and I knew that we were getting close, and we walked through the metal culvert, and then there were some rescuers that had just happened like seconds before, pulled up on a dirt road that we couldn't see, and so we climbed up to them, and it was around noon that day that they found us. And they checked in, and they checked us out, and we were scraped up, dehydrated, and hungry, but all in all, we were in pretty good shape. It was a big impact because it helped me prioritize when we got into that situation as to what were the next steps to get out. We had very little water, so I knew that water was the most important. I knew that we didn't have to worry about shelter. We were going to be cold, but it wasn't going to rain. If it was going to rain that night, then we would have had to build a shelter. So just going through all the other steps of what to prioritize and what to concentrate on. We didn't have any food, and I told my son that it was going to be a lousy time, that we were going to be hungry, but it didn't really matter because we were going to be found way before that food would come into play. So you know, we through the entire time we had our ups and downs, but it was a good experience. It was a tough experience, but I was glad to have been to the Ironcenturion training just a month or two before. Something that I'll always remember is that Joshua singing hymns, you know, walking down the trail to comfort, and I just thought it was such a beautiful example of you know, that we were there, but Christ was drawing us to Him.
Back home we have a friend who is tied into some search and rescue efforts, mainly for human trafficking purposes, to rescue people caught up in the sex trade. But they have assets to GPS and their GPS tracking. They have assets to satellite imagery from the FBI. So we were already in process to retask satellites in space to help find Matt and Joshua. And just that picture of God's complete and utter care of the two of them while they were on that mountain was really reassuring to me as a friend, knowing that he was going to be okay and that he was going to be found, because God was literally throwing so much of his people's resources into finding these two guys on the mountain. And for me, as a testimony, that just means so much spiritually, because there's no effort God won't go to rescue his children, whether that's in a physical situation or whether that's in a spiritual situation. And that spiritual metaphor for me has just been a real blessing over the last couple of months as I've sat and reflected on who God is and what character we learned about him during that time. So Matt's testimony means a lot to me personally. I'm very glad that my friend was found and that he's here with us today. But I'm also really thankful for what God taught us about himself in that time.